was blind, but now I can see.
Yeah, calisthenics number 12. Yeah. Fly robotics. Bifocals, my only purpose is to feed the locals. I'm spreading love when I see you and gotta approach you. I see the goodness in you, I wouldn't John Wick you. I know you hustling for your family just to pay the fiscal. I see the God up in you, you bless your physical. While we navigating problems, the world is abysmal. Skip the one up, let's get it to the center. Your house is big as mine, we can always help each other. Affirmation smother, it ain't even cost me a dime to uplift my brother.
Yo, listen, hey everybody, welcome back to Vulnerability is the New Sexy. I'm your host, Joe Corley, and this is the safest space for black men to be vulnerable and get to that next level. Tonight, we talking porn. I know y'all excited about this. so I usually have, I grab some friends from here and there, and I usually don't get too many professionals. But tonight, when I asked any of the brothers wanted to be on, they all said, hell no. Ain't nobody that vulnerable. We ain't talking about that with you. So, I went and got the professionals tonight, man. So we got a panel full of black male therapists. Everybody on the panel is a black male therapist. And, they say, in the words of Hove, they say there ain't many of us, but less is more. So there's plenty of us. We all right here tonight. And just to introduce my guys here, man, we got Karlos Lyons, my brother, Dr. Sekou Fraser, and Dr. Curtis Hill, who we're going to be talking about porn tonight, man. Porn tonight. I don't know how a lot of people were excited when I mentioned this earlier, man. So we're going to see how it goes. And if you're out there listening and you in the chat, feel free to ask questions. These brothers are very well informed, and myself included, and we're going to do our best to answer your questions and try to help you if you're somebody that wants to get over this hump. We're not shaming anybody that wants to dive head first into that porn. That's on you. But if you're trying to get over the hump, this is where you need to be tonight. So let's talk about. Let me start with you, Dr. Curtis, and I want to ask you straight up, man. What qualifies somebody as addicted to porn, from your perspective?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, anything that you do in excess, as they say, for sure, that's when it's an issue. But think about this: when it's basically uncontrollable, you know that, hey, that you can't control your sexual urges, and that's whether or not something that you see or behavior, something that you do at that particular point when it becomes out of control, and it's certainly impacting different areas of your life, whether that be your work life, family life, and otherwise. Yeah, you got a porn addiction.
Yeah. So you feel like anytime it has a negative impact on your life, then we're going to qualify that or classify that as an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Brother Karlos, you got anything you want to add to that, or do you feel like you can shed some light on kind of how someone falls into porn addiction?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me on this talk tonight. And yes, I'm excited to talk about this because this is a regular occurrence for me in my practice. I work with probably 80% men in my practice, and this is a common topic that we discuss. I just had a lengthy conversation about this yesterday, and one of the things that I would say when we talk about like this idea of it being addictive is, if we look at it from a brain chemistry kind of thing, your prefrontal cortex versus your emotional brain and what's going on there, you are being hijacked by this need for dopamine, right? The rush that you get from the high of engaging any kind of addictive behavior. It's a dopamine rush and just the endorphins that come from that over and over and over again, that it has become insatiable. It has become all consuming. And it's like to the point where we don't feel like we have regular executive functioning anymore in aspects of our life. Yeah. So I think this topic is very nuanced when we talk about how does one fall into this, because there's so many factors that lead to addiction of any kind. With porn addiction, I think about our narrative and our embedded meaning, and specifically our sexual narrative. So what I do with a lot of my clients is I go back. I do a little bit of narrative therapy and kind of go back and kind of just start to see where you first got exposed to it, just kind of where it has begun to become a part of your experience, and what's been the utility of porn in your life in different phases, so we can kind of map that out together.
Yeah. So following up on that, Sekou, let me ask you, man. It sounds like what these brothers are saying is that, like any addiction, porn is used as a coping tool. So it's more like instead of treating, I mean, you're treating the underlying symptoms. Is that what you feel?
Can you repeat that? You said does what now?
Like any other addiction, right? Like drinking, like drugs. We using it to cope with something,
Right.
right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's usually when a person feels that they're preoccupied with something as far as sex addiction, or they feel they have to watch something or they have to see something, they have to do it to either relieve some form of stress, then it does become a problem because there is a lack of control. So, I don't do this, I feel stress, then I'm kind of stuck in this pattern where I need to be able to get out of this pattern in order to be able to just function. And that's what happens with a lot of folks that I do encounter in my practice as well, as far as they just get stuck in this loop, in this pattern, so to speak.
Yeah. So let me follow up with you then. Let me ask you, what are some of the like consequences of porn addiction that you've seen in the men that you've treated?
So some of the things that I'll notice is that it starts to destroy their relationship with their partners because it becomes something that they have to hide from their partners, or their partners feels like they're not good enough. And then it's also something where um, some men, they actually suffer from something called porn induced erectile dysfunction. So it's almost like they have to see porn or the sexual act or whatever it is in order for them to become aroused. So it becomes very destructive overall in nature, because without having it, then they tend to decompensate, and it just creates a lot of problems within their relationship. And then they're not having sex with their partners. Like, there's unrealistic expectations that are placed on their partners as well.
Yeah. Dr. Curtis, man, a lot of women take that personally, you know.
Well, well,
Should
shouldn't they? Should they take that personal? I mean, hey,
they be taking it personal from
yeah,
women?
well, think about this, man. Hey, the issue here is that you have built this relationship that basically your level of intimacy and trust, which is also embedded within this kind of dynamics of actually your sexual relationship in terms of your marriage or your couplehood or whatever the case may be. And when you have that and so forth, that's something that hey you're using to grow and go deeper in. And all of a sudden you realize that hey you're sharing that with somebody else on some level. It's again, this is when we get into this whole piece about cheating, right? Oh, is it really cheating for quote unquote for you to be engaged in porn? Because that's something that you have to have just to be involved or engaged, as Dr. Sekou was just talking about in a relationship with your spouse, where that you can't even function because now you got what? You got two different levels. You have this lover in the bedroom with you, but you also have this level that you do independently, and a lot of times you do that in secrecy as well.
Yeah. So you feel like it's valid for a woman to be like, I'm taking this personal. This is
Sure. Think about that
she
now. I
tied
mean,
she tied to her value if her husband is addicted to porn.
she's tied to her value, but also she see that as being, hey, this is an intrusion upon really what I'm supposed to be doing in terms of serving and meeting your needs in our relationship.
Okay.
So when that happens, what you take that personal. The fact that hey, that for the most part, whether you've done that by virtue of on your own, independent of me, or something that may have happened in our relationship on some level that has contributed to me feeling, because that's what some men will tell you. They're gonna say, hey, I'm not getting enough. Because I'm not getting enough sex in my relationship, with my spouse or my partner and so forth. This is my way to not cheat per se. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get involved with. I'm gonna start, doing porn and so forth, not realizing how that could easily spiral into something else over time.
Okay. Carlos, man, let me ask you, you feel like you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm honestly still processing what Dr. Sekou mentioned about the porn-induced erectile dysfunction and just the impact on our mental health that the engagement with porn is. Just the fact that the visual stimuli, and then how it takes away, it's kind of a voyeuristic behavior. It takes away the satisfaction that a live in-person person can have with you because you're focused on something that came through the screen. I mean, I think that's really important to highlight, and I agree with what Dr. Curtis mentioned as well.
Can you cure your erectile dysfunction by simply turning off from porn, Carlos?
Can you cure it?
Yeah.
I think it's one of those conversations of, if we're talking about it's porn induced, then we do have to check, obviously our engagement with the activity of pornography use. And that's a process. I think it's not just like a one and done kind of thing. It is a process, because when we talk about the brain, we talk about neuroplasticity and the way that you've wired the brain, and how porn sets up these really deep grooves in our brain over time, these highways, neurological pathways in our brain, and the stories that we create, the meaning that we create in those stories, all of that has to be processed through. So it's not just like a turn it off and your ED is cured right then. If it is something that has been a part of your life for any amount of time, then we really do need to process through that. And I would love to hear Dr. Fraser's thought on that as well.
Yeah, I was about to pass it to you. You want to follow up on that, Dr. Sekou?
Yes, I do. Of course, it's going to take time. And so there's different forms. Like, of course, one of the major forms is cognitive behavior therapy. Your thoughts control your behaviors and your actions. But it's just not like something like Carlos said. It's not a switch that you turn on and off. You got to understand and get to the root of the reason why that person is so deeply ingrained with that pornography. And then you have to start to scale things back. So it's going to go in a tier system where you start to scale things back, and pretty much using some sort of harm reduction type of method of, for 1 week, instead of watching porn 7 days a week, now you're scaling it back to 6 days a week. And let's talk about the effects. Tell me, how are you feeling? Those are the type of things we want to really figure out exactly what's going on in their brain, their mind. And is it creating a lot of anxiety for them not to watch that porn, or does it have another adverse effect to them, whether it could be depression or just like we're talking about stress? Because if I don't watch porn, or if I don't ejaculate, I feel stressed. I feel like I cannot continue on with my day. So there's a lot of different things that are going to go into that.
Yeah. So some men are using it as a stress reliever. You know what I mean? And then the erectile dysfunction, it comes along with it, right? Dr. Curtis, I know you've treated a lot of brothers with this ailment, man. Have you seen, I don't know, some if you guys out there got questions in the chat, please put them in there. I see there's a question in there right now. I'm gonna get to it in a second. But I know someone wants to ask, have you seen anyone turn around their dysfunction through talk therapy, through treatment, and kind of overcoming the porn addiction?
Yes, of course I have. I mean, I don't think that's something that is that's rare per se. I think the issue is, and it's already been stated by other therapists, and that is that it's a pacing, it's a timing of how long is it going to take. You just can't turn a behavior around in 1 day. I mean, just think about that. I go into really trying to find out the origin of how you even quote unquote had this affinity toward porn in the first place. I normally want to know a little bit about that, because that tells me a lot. So if that's this particular client I'm working with, Nintendo, hey, I started watching, using actually Hustler, Playbook, Playboy, all those quote unquote those magazines. Yeah, that's real old school. but now it's like the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. I mean, hey, it could be any combination, and we're just talking about men. I mean, hey, this is also an issue with women as well, so let's not give them that pass. I know our focus is on men right now, but the idea is knowing a little bit about where they came from or how they got there when they were first exposed. Was it acceptable as well? Was it something that says, oh, it's okay, this is a natural thing, this is a normal thing, this is part of human behavior in terms of development, before you even had your first opportunity to have any kind of sexual intercourse, you may have started with that as an onboarding process to prepare yourself for that. So again, I think all those things come into play in terms of determining determining the amount of time it will take for you start using a turning of that behavior that quote unquote they want to move away from. But I use this in term and I use it consistently. The issue is how big is your want to. So if your want to is big enough, I think it really will, quote unquote, you can make some strides fairly quickly.
Let me follow up because something you said was interesting. Do men and women use porn for the same reasons in your experience?
Yes, I believe they do. Absolutely. And the reason why is that for some women, and again, I was dealing with a client just the other day, and he was just talking about the challenges he's having in his relationship with his wife. The idea they separated and this issue that's going on, and he said that that he realized it was a problem, whereas that she's always wanting him to take the initiative to quote unquote to start to become intimate. And he was just noticing one night, in the middle of the night, she said, like, I've been asking for this, but I'm seeing her going at it hard at night, and I'm right next to him. And like, okay, where is this coming from? So your point is valid. Yeah, it does happen for the same reason. I think what happens is that there are multiple tiers, though. It's not just one particular thing that may quote unquote cause someone to feel like, hey, they want to actually start partaking in porn. It's not one thing. Yes, is stress a part of it? I think that's probably at the seat of it, but there's always something behind the stress, right? That's causing that determines whether or not somebody start moving in that particular direction where they say, hey, this is going to give me the relief I need to try to work through this.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that, man. Carlos, I'm gonna throw this first question to you, man. If anybody wants to add on to the answer, please let me know. But brother here says, is there a link between child abuse and addictive behaviors?
Yes, there is absolutely a link that can be made between child abuse and addictive behaviors. I think when I mentioned earlier about narrative and embedded meaning in our narrative, our stories, our origin stories and just the things that we experience, specifically those things that could be adverse experiences that create trauma, most definitely can lead to addictive patterns in our lives.
Okay. Anyone y'all want to add on that, or is that?
No, I want to kind of give I actually real life a case situation about this. This is a guy that quote unquote that now has certainly a sexual addiction, but he said that he needs to work through this thing because he was at a young age where basically quote unquote an older woman performed oral sex on him, and because she performed oral sex on him, now that got him early on. As Carlos was talking about how those synapses and stuff going on not developed. He's really not even developed sexually to be able to kind of prepare for that. But now all of a sudden he's dealing with all those dynamics, and now he's bringing it into his adult life, whereas that he's always looking for that hit and so forth. And now, quote unquote, he's now quote unquote considered a sexaholic, right? Because he wants to have sex. His urges are pushing him all the time. So yeah, that certainly will happen. Even something as early as a form of abuse, based on the question that was presented.
Amazing. Dr. Sekou, man, I'm gonna throw this next one to you, brother. If you want to answer it, do men have a fear of being vulnerable with their women or woman?
I would have to say yes, and I'd say a big reason for that is the perception of being weak or just not having it together. So it's very difficult for men. I would say another reason is because how we're socialized to be, hey, we don't need to talk about stuff, we'll just figure it out. And men deal with a lot of societal pressures that we don't tend to open up and really talk about open and honestly. So let's say if it's something with finances, could be something we're talking about sex and porn, might be performance anxiety. A man may have had a bad experience before, and sitting down and really talking to his woman, hey, I got to sit down and talk to you about something. In the back of his mind, he may fear that he may be ridiculed about it later, or it may come up later on in another conversation, or she might tell someone else, one of her girlfriends, So that's a big reason why I think a lot of men tend to be vulnerable and they're not just open until they have a deep emotional connection with their partner.
Yeah. If you watch
Can I speak to that a little bit just real quickly? Yeah. I think it's important to understand about really what is behind the idea of vulnerability. I like to simplify this to say literally vulnerability is just literally learning how to take a risk. you're taking a risk about putting yourself in this sort of space with your partner in such a way where that quote unquote you're trusting and believing the fact that what you're doing and taking this risk, they're not going to use it in some form of fashion and work it against you. When you can understand that, hey, that you can feel safe with your partner, then it's a little bit easier to become more vulnerable. So yeah, there's some fear that's there, and it's like I said, that's a two-way street. But certainly for a number of men, they really struggle with that because the first person they should be the most vulnerable with should be with their woman, and I think that's a challenge that most men kind of run into.
Yeah. And if you watch your show consistently, you'll hear me say often that a man's path to healing is going to have to go through unlearning a lot of stigmas and stereotypes that they were brought up with in childhood. I mean, there's just so many things that we grow up with that we believe our masculinity is defined by. And we learn, if we learn, some of us never get there later in life, that these things are not true. You're not weak. You're not less masculine if you decide to be vulnerable with your woman. Actually, that's one of the most masculine things you can actually do. But I'm gonna throw this, since all of us are therapists, I'm gonna throw this scenario out here, and I just want to kind of see how you guys will handle it. A couple comes in your office and they are struggling with porn addiction. Let's just say the man's struggling with porn addiction, and he says, I'm taking this comment here. I just want to see something different sometimes. Where do you go with that? And I'll start with you, Carlos. Where do you go with that when you sit down and they tell you that?
Yeah, I would want to explore that. Honestly, I'm as much as they feel comfortable doing. A lot of times when I have couples right off the top, I would probably separate them for a little bit just to kind of hear more individually, especially we just talked about vulnerability. And if he does not feel comfortable going into great detail in front of his partner, kind of understanding, okay, what is the sexual fantasy? What is the sexual worldview? What is the sexual experience that you have kind of crafted in your mind, and what is exactly the meaning for you? That's kind of where I would start, is just really exploring that more and teasing that out, because, and then also just understand, what is his expectation in this relationship? Do you expect to have to be in a monogamous relationship and also have the opportunity to kind of do this every now and then, or is that an expectation that you guys have agreed upon? Is that something that she's cool with? Like, just kind of understanding what is y'all's boundaries and expectations around that kind of mindset. That's where I would start. And exploring that, and then vice versa with her, kind of understanding what is her expectation and what is her sexual worldview, unpacking her experience in fantasy as well.
Was she hanging from the chandelier when you met her?
Right.
So why?
Right.
You expect her to climb up there now after
right.
after 5-6 years of marriage?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
you're putting a lot of pressure on her. What about you, Dr. Sekou?
Number one, I want to know, what is something different? So, of course, I want to get a little deeper into that, just kind of find that out. And to piggyback off of what Carlos said, sometimes it does help, to split them up or ask, hey, are you comfortable talking to your partner about this? Or is it something that we need to just have separate sessions? But another thing that I would also get into right after we figure out, what is this something different that you want to do or see with their partner? Sometimes I want to figure out, have y'all tried a lot of different things? Have y'all tried to be creative? Do you role play? Because if you want to see your woman in something different or in a different light, maybe she might need to put on a wig, and that gives you a whole new fantasy. So I just want to get a deeper understanding, and people need to dare to be more adventurous and creative as long as they're feeling safe. But that's something for couples to sit down and discuss with their therapist and see what their limits, their expectations, what are things you tried, some things that you have not tried, and your comfort level.
You ever had to uncouple somebody because they couldn't get there, or
as far as tell them to go their own separate ways? Is that what you mean?
Sure, yeah.
I just tell them to really take a look at these expectations that y'all placed on each other. And as far as the term of the relationship, is it worth saving for you all at this point? Because it's not just the sex thing. Sometimes it is, right? But a lot of times there's other underlying things underneath that relationship. Then it boils and it comes out to, well, the sex isn't good, or this, or whatever the case might be. But there's a lot of other things there before it just becomes about the sex. from my experience.
What about you, Dr. Curtis? What happens to that couple sit down in front of you?
Wow. I think these brothers are on point. I mean, hey, it's not much for me to really say. I mean, they hitting it. That's exactly the direction that I would go in as well. But I would be able to kind of ask a little bit, kind of somewhat what you just kind of put out there, Joe, and that's the fact that hey, when you met her, was she swinging off the, the chandeliers and so forth. I think that's important to know because what happens is that we put these undue expectations. Going back to what we just been shared, we put these undue expectations on one another. And when they don't live up to those expectations, normally we use that and use it as a power move against your partner in some form or fashion to be able to, and then use it to say, oh, because you're not doing this or you're not doing that, but you haven't even talked about it and the expectation's not there. I mean, I'm going to go back old school again. It's kind of like Richard Pryor would say that, normally what happens is the fact that, you've been with somebody for a while now, you want something new and so forth. And he said, you got to make something new, out of the old. And then I think that's also so true. Learn how to quote unquote, that's that creativity, that's those things that hey, that you're letting your partner know that hey, that you still are what's most important to me. And therefore I want to explore this with you. And I want to kind of do some of these things with because people come from different levels. Some people are very conservative in terms of their sex lives, and there are others that hey, that like, okay, this is the only way we can do it. We can only, I've even heard couples say, one person say, hey, my woman, man, I'm having a hard time because every time we want to make love, she want to play gospel music while we making love, and like I can't do that. Now I'm just saying this happens.
Sorry,
This really does happen. So
I
anyway,
didn't mean to
so
laugh,
anyway,
brother. Go ahead.
but anyway, I'm just validating and affirming my brothers. They on point. I'm with them the same way.
Yeah, man. Okay. Man, thinking about I had a couple one time. It actually wasn't a couple. It was the man wouldn't come, but they had been married for about 30 something years, and he had a porn addiction like early on in the marriage, but he had given it up for almost a decade, and she never got over that. She never got over that. They've been having intimacy issues that entire time, and I could not for any. I never had to fire a client before, but I really came close on this one. She ended up firing herself, but I could never get over that hump, man, of recognizing that she had to move on. So like that porn addiction really spoke to her value, you know what I mean? And she could never like really tune in back in with who she was as a woman after that, man. So it's a lot of damage being done.
Hey Joe, and I think this is important. I've had something similar, and this may have been the case. I'm not sure. Is the fact that for some women, when they see that piece, because that wasn't revealed on the front end, they see that as a form of deception, and that's a form of, hey, I've really been duped from the beginning. So really, my vows that I took with you, and so forth, all of those things, quote unquote, are not valid now because now you done turned my whole idea about what it really means to quote unquote to initially make our commitment from the beginning upside down, and therefore that's where that ends up that you get stuck in that particular point because you don't believe that you can recover from it.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. 100%. I also I don't know how many of y'all experienced this, but you counsel young men that come into you in their early 20s, just in the beginning stages of their marriage, and they are like struggling with their relationship with Christ. And the porn addiction becomes like almost like a self-hate thing. Like they really start to hate themselves. It's not about any dysfunction or anything. But have y'all experienced any clients like that? Carlos, I see you shaking your head.
Well, I was really trying to understand. You were saying that their usage of porn was because of like self-loathing.
No, they're self-loathing because of their usage of porn. Like I don't know what
Oh, okay, yeah, makes sense.
Like get his life right with Christ.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And all he can't. He's like, man, I can't shake this, and it just turns into a self-hatred.
Oh yeah. I would definitely say with porn addiction and then with a lot of addictive patterns, I think a part of the cycle that I kind of cover with a lot of my clients is that you kind of have I kind of call them the default positions that we fall into of why we use in the first place. And once you've kind of gone through a binging cycle, you kind of make these resolutions with yourself like, man, I don't like the the negative consequences associated with the usage that I have of this particular thing. And that's where the self-loathing and the self-hatred comes in because of feelings of guilt or shame. How could I be doing this? You know, and then it tends to isolate you from your partner. And so your conscience is weighing on you because you're having this activity. And then if we're talking about in the context of, you said church, right? Christ.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, you know, spirituality and specifically Christianity, because I can speak to that as well. I think in a lot of spaces, this is not about, I'm not trying to browbeat, you know, churches or, you know, religious organizations, but I think a very unhealthy way of doing this is only talking about, you know, just don't do. We do a lot of like don't do in the church, a lot of saying like condemning this activity, condemning, you know, the reasons why we do porn and all that kind of stuff. I think what makes it unhealthy is that we don't have healthy dialogues around it. And so like the feelings of guilt are amplified because all we hear is like, don't do this. There's not a more nuanced conversation around, again, I call it sexual narrative, embedded meaning, really getting into the why and becoming curious about the story that kind of follows the activity versus like, just don't do it. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
No, 100%.
Yeah. So the condemnation and the self-loathing, which I tell clients, check that at the door. Like, we don't want to get into that cycle here, because even if we start having a process where we're talking about relapse prevention and I'm trying to help work you through, you know, what that would look like, I always say that relapsing will probably be a part of your recovery process. It doesn't mean that this is not going to happen again. So I don't want to set you up for failure and that, you know, you have this expectation like, okay, well, I'm here, we're talking about it. So if I do it again, then that shame on me. Like, no, we can't go that route because it's only going to make it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And let me speak to a little bit of that. I think we struggle in that space because the whole idea of even behind that narrative that's developed, even about your sense of self, you unable to forgive yourself. I think that I see a couple of things, especially if I'm dealing with someone from a faith-based perspective. One of the things I try to bring to their attention is the fact that, okay, well, at what point do you believe that you can't forgive yourself? But yet still God can forgive you, right? The God can forgive you, but you can't forgive yourself. So literally what you've done in that space, you became a little bitty God to yourself. And because you became this little bitty God to yourself, that's who you're looking at. You are not looking at, quote unquote, the big God that's in your life, who basically who has forgiven you, what should be who it is that should help you move on. That doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. You're going to hit it every time. But what it does mean is the fact that there's hope. Because I think that's what we do a lot in terms of therapy. For some people, we're instilling hope. We're instilling hope for them to be able to believe that, hey, that whatever they're experiencing, whatever change they want for their lives and so forth, that, hey, they can have some hope in being able to do so. And they just need some tools to kind of help them in that process. So again, I think that's one thing we have to be very, very careful. This idea of sitting in this condemnation. And I'm with my brother. The church is one of the worst. I'm sorry. I'm going to go that far. The church is one of the worst in that, in terms of how to deal with those issues, because this whole idea of condemnation is either you are or you're not. There's this absolute thinking that, hey, that you have to do this way all the time, and if you fall in any form or fashion, you're not worthy, you know. And so I think that's another issue that, hey, that we really need to kind of, focus on, and it impacts the Black community even more so, because, in terms of the role of the Black community in terms of the church, especially Black men.
Also, I just want to throw something really quick. The one thing that, when it comes to those type of situations, I always encourage my clients to extend grace, patience, and grace. Because without that, you're not going to get far. We're not perfect. We're human first before anything else. So patience and grace is key.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue to this question right here. Brother, every addiction is bad. If you getting on Instagram way too much and you feel like you can't live without that, that's bad. If you eat a bunch of cheese every night and you feel like you can't get rid of that, that's bad. So anything with addiction tied to it is bad, because when you can't live without something, there's a problem, or you feel like you can't live with something. Go ahead, Carlos.
Can I help to kind of reframe that as well? Because I think when we use bad or good, or there's like some of that language, the semantics there kind of leads back into that cycle of the condemnation and the guilt. And
Educate
so
me.
what I would also say is maybe asking myself, is this helpful? Is this healthy? Right? Is this addictive pattern actually? Because there are, to me, when I think about the term addiction and its, its root word having to do with being consumed by something, I tell my clients all the time, we're all consumed by many things. There can be really healthy, good things to be consumed by, and there can be really unhealthy things to be consumed by. And then everything obviously has to do with the spectrum of if I'm doing, I guess you can even drink too much water, right? Like you can do too much of a good thing. But what I think is more helpful is to say, like, is this a healthy behavior? Is this a healthy pattern for me? Or is this an unhelpful pattern? And if we could kind of make that reframe, is like, whether it is a good thing or a bad thing, is it helpful for me? Might be a way to help you kind of think through it. Like, no, it may not be as helpful as I think it is because of these reasons, X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Yeah. I was somebody, like myself, come say, well, you hear the word addiction and it automatically has negative connotations to it. Because when you're talking about like we started at the top of the program, usually when something is an addiction, it has a negative impact on your daily life, right? So when I say bad, that's kind of what I was thinking, but I do appreciate that reframe because that's very helpful. The connotations are very helpful for me to describe to my clients in a way.
Yeah, and let me kind of pick back up. I love the idea of talking about healthy and unhealthy.
Okay.
Because I think because that's what we're doing. Even when I'm dealing with couples, I talk about the fact that okay, when you move into kind of any kind of conflict, your argument or quote unquote, it gets a little bit heated. And actually, I draw a lot from clients, and the clients share this with me. She said, "Yeah, when we get into heated fellowship, I'm like, oh, I like that." So we call it heated fellowship versus an argument or debate or whatever the case may be. It's your heated fellowship that you're having because you're still in fellowship with your partner. Either way, it might be a little bit heated because you have strong positions and some strong values about it, but it's learning how to kind of work through that regardless.
Okay. Say cool, man. I want you to respond to this, brother, man. If you feel so inclined.
Yeah, sure. JB, as far as it goes with what if you watch it once a day or 3 times a week, anytime that something dictates or you have a lack of control and it's dominating your time and it's over your priorities such as work, your children, your family, you know, that's a problem. If it's something sporadic, because I'm not here to judge whether you choose to watch porn, you choose not to watch porn. That's really frankly your business. But whenever you have a loss of control and you have to do it, oh, I have to do that. No, you don't have to watch porn. You have to eat to live, or you have to drink water. There's certain things that are necessities and other things are not. But if it's a sporadic choice that you make, then that's up to you. That's it.
Yeah. And remember, fella, when you walk into the therapy space and you have acknowledged that this is a problem, you have acknowledged that it's a problem. If you've been forced to come into the therapy space, and somebody else has acknowledged that it's a problem for you, we can talk about it. But the fact that somebody else that you care about and you share space with is acknowledging this is a problem, it's now a problem for you. So we can talk about and discuss how big of a problem it is. But you of yourself, like we don't tell you about who you are as therapists.
Hmm.
Most of our job is you're the expert on you, and we're just listening and taking cues from the things that you say and the way that you react to certain things. And so if I say, man, you kind of tensed up when you talked about that, you know what I mean? Like, we got to explore that a little bit because obviously I'm looking at you. I can see that it's a problem for you. You know what I mean?
Good, good.
Uh,
Hey, Joe. Let me speak a little bit to what JB is communicated as well.
okay.
That he talked about the idea of comparison. I really try to stay away from comparison. He talked about the people that he's seen in counseling that are way worse than himself. So in essence, he put himself on this scale. 1 time, 3 times. But when I compare myself to some of these other folks in counseling, What happens is the fact that hey, they stuff is like crazy,
Yeah.
off, right?
Yeah.
And I think what happens is that we set up this dynamics of being better than and so forth, and that's not what we really want to do. That's not, it's kind of like you in competition with yourself. You're not in competition with what? With someone else. Don't compare yourself. I think that's one way we able to kind of work through this in space when you have some of these challenges, or regardless of what it is. And the idea is being able to quote unquote not base it based up on a juxtaposition of someone else. Because we're gonna always find someone else that hey, that we can kind of quote unquote say, oh, I'm not there, but we can always find somebody that hey, that's less than per se, and we put ourselves in that space where we're measuring and so forth. So yeah, JB, be careful about that piece and so forth. You're in competition with yourself. Know what your own standard is about what it is, what's important for you and your values, and work toward what? Moving in that direction.
Can I add something on to that as well? From what Dr. Curtis just shared. I also think, going back to the conversation about what I feel is helpful or unhelpful or healthy and unhealthy with the idea when you say comparison, I think sometimes in addiction language or like in addiction work, clients or even in certain spaces when we talk about recovery from stuff, we have this language that talks about like the days and counting the days and keeping up tabs on how long we've been sober and not doing a certain thing. And I have talked to clients about, I understand why that's not a bad thing in the sense of, I don't think that, it's going to ruin your chances of maintaining sobriety. But I also feel like, because we're talking about a whole worldview change or whole paradigm shift in the way you think and conceptualize certain things that you're doing, and making it part of a new lifestyle change. Sometimes the counting, and I would love to hear from you guys what you think about that. The counting of the days of when the last time I did it and when the last time I looked at it, and it's been this long. And sometimes you can use that as a justification to go back and do it again. It's like, well, it's been 3 months, so I can go back and look and do what I did 3 months ago. It's only going to be this one time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, cool. And then Dr. Curtis, respond to that, please.
It's on you, Sekou. Go on.
All right. Yeah. As far as using it as this type of metric scale of as far as, oh, I've been clean for, let's say, 3 months and now I can go back and do that. Yeah, I think it's not really a good thing. I think you have to prioritize what exactly is your goal. What exactly am I here for? As far as this is a problem, what type of result do I want to have? So if my end game is to become free of porn, or I want to be more healthy, or I want to exercise, it's a commitment that you make to yourself. So going back to do it once, that's more so a character issue that's on you at the end of the day, rather than anything else. Because we're not here to judge you. Like I said, I can't be in your bedroom. I don't know what's going on. But at the end of the day, it's a choice that you're going to have to choose for yourself.
What say you, Dr. Curtis?
Yeah, I think that's extremely important, and I'm with you, my brother Carlos, about this whole idea of this counting thing. I mean, I one of the things I actually press and talk about in therapy is learning how to stay away from absolutes. And normally, when you bring in comparisons, bring in numbers and so forth, then what happens now? You develop a scale, and when you start developing a scale, the scale normally puts you in this space of what? Moving towards some sort of absolute. And if you can stay away from that, I think it helped. I understand the dynamics of it based upon a system. So you may be participating in AA or whatever, and you have these pieces. I don't want to take away from that if that is helping you feel good about what you're doing and it's giving you the success you need and so forth. I think that's a good thing. I'm gonna support you in that process. But at the other side of that is the fact that if you quote unquote now elevating yourself because I've been this has been 16 years and I've dealt with with brothers that's the case. Hey, it's been they telling you the day of, the night of that they did things, and it's been 16 years since I've done that and so forth. And I call my sponsor every morning. I'm serious. And I mean, and it's real. And so I don't want to take away from that, but I also don't want them to feel condemned if quote unquote, what would that mean if you happen to what? to fall that one time. Then what happens? This is a house of cards, right? And then everything kind of falls apart altogether. Your sense of worth about who you are and so forth. So I try to embed that along the way, Carlos, to reinforce that, hey, this is still who you are, and it's not just based on that number. Understand that in your essence, you are good, right? I mean, no, that's that from a therapeutic standpoint. I'm unconditional positive regard. Hey, that who you are is what is powerful. Who you are is good. Who you are can make a difference in your life and so forth. I try to keep with that premise in terms of trying to bring that, keep that in front of my clients when I'm working with it.
Man, I sure hope y'all out there soaking up all this free game the brothers is giving you tonight. Huh? We don't know where to send the bill, but if you if you point us in the direction, we'll definitely send it to you because we all got rates. That's for sure. That's for listen. Brother Mike, who turned me down for this episode. Brother Mike said, "Hell no, I ain't coming on this episode." But I'm glad you're out there listening, brother. I'm glad you're out there listening. And I thought this was important, man, because I want to get his brother his flowers, man, for being vulnerable the way he is and putting himself out there and talking about these things tonight, man. Because I know you're not alone in having this conversation. I know it's plenty of other brothers just sitting in the sideline and sitting in the back, soaking in this free game, wanting to beat this challenge, and they're not willing to speak up about it in this public platform. But you know what I mean. Good looking out for you, brother. I want to talk about how you guys go about finding solutions. I know that you kind of find the underlying problem and what the root is. I got a specific question actually. I'm gonna start with you, Dr. Curtis. Does the kind of porn that the person watches matter to you as a therapist?
No, it doesn't. But I got something else that I want to kind of add to this, that in terms of how I'm dealing with clients.
Okay.
When they're introducing to me about quote unquote any kind of pornographic activity they may be involved in, the next thing I want to ask is that, okay, are you masturbating when you're doing it? Because there's something that sometimes it's just the porn itself is enough. And what happens, they have these ideas and these thoughts and so forth, and they're not masturbating. I want to break it down first of all, and we have a tendency to see them as as being one and the same. I see masturbation is a outgrowth from the porn. And so that's the thing. That is one of the things that happens, in this here process because of the porn that's causing you to quote unquote to masturbate. So that may mean in terms of working with that particular client a little bit different in terms of saying, okay, I want to know what are you really trying to do? Is this really you just trying to masturbate? So your stress levels are high and so forth. And this is why you just masturbating. Because my question is that can you also masturbate without the porn? Because if you can masturbate without the porn, then guess what? We can work. I can work with that client a little bit differently because there are some other issues that we're dealing with in that regard. So I think that's one thing that I do in terms of working with clients, that I start with that premise, understanding that piece first. And when I share that, when I talk to clients in that regard, they like, oh, I never thought about it like that. I always thought that they were just one and the same. I said, no, they're not one and the same. And I think what happens, you have to understand that there's a difference that's there. And then the other thing is that in terms of my whole approach, there are a couple of things that I do. And I talk about these what I call a three-legged table. I talk about the idea of no understanding. First of all, what's your red flags? Understand what your red flags are. What are some of the things that you see coming because it's part of a quote unquote a inventory of if I see these things coming, typically that leads me to the next behavior, which is normally what? My trigger, right? So I look for red flags. Okay, I want you to understand what your red flags are, and sometimes that could be any combination of things, and sometimes they look like they're the same between a red flag and your trigger. And then the third one is on this three-legged table is that I talk about your resources. What are your assets and so forth? Because it's what you know about that you can use and leverage to your benefit that's going to be so helpful for you, that's going to help you, quote unquote, be able to kind of overcome, if that's your desire, if that's what your want to is. If your want to is to what? I'm trying to move away from this. I see how this is impacting my life, my relationships and so forth. So therefore, understand what those assets, what those resources are. So I talk about the three-legged table in terms of the whole approach, in terms of how to do that. I even go into an inventory and talk about like, okay, hey, Let's look at what you spending your money on in this regard, and your time. How much time? Let's go ahead and just do a assessment. Do your own personal assessment. How much time do you spend doing this? How much money have you? Let's look at your bank account. How much money have you spent on this? That's a good way to be able to kind of start that process to kind of work through it.
Damn, it's a lot of free game right there, brother Carl. You taking notes? What you doing over there?
I'm just writing down what I want to say.
Okay, yeah, okay. Sekou, man, let's go to you, man. How do you kind of start your treatment process? What steps do you take to address someone who comes in with porn addiction?
Number one, of course, I want to understand how is it impacting their life, because when they come in, it's usually problematic. It's either it's affecting their relationship. So I want to have a general idea of how has this impacted or affected your life. And so from there, I want to get that baseline understanding. And as far as what are you trying to do? What are you really trying to change from there? We want to reduce that behavior and eventually eliminate that behavior. So if we're going to go through the process of eliminating that behavior, we want to reduce the amount of times, but also in addition to that, I want to know, what is your support system like? And as far as the stressors, is it, do I watch porn because I'm stressed? Is it that? So we're identifying the things and we're figuring out what exactly can we change in your life. And then after we figure out what are those things we can change, we need to have a support system to hold you accountable. Because a lot of times when we want to do things, we have the best intentions to do these things or beat pornography. But if we don't have the support system, it's hard to do it alone. So I want to enlist a support system for that person to reach out to so that they have what they need to work past that hump. And that's usually my approach to it. Excuse me.
So you treating the symptoms before you do anything. You want to understand what are the root causes of you being engaged in this activity, and then working on that before we.
Yeah, it's just, I saw Brother JB in the comments who's saying that sometimes he watches it or he's watching pornography instead of working on himself. So with a client like him, okay, so you really want to work on yourself, but you find this to be more important. So now we got to rearrange and prioritize. How can you put yourself first and put this pornography thing behind you? Mm-hmm. Let's say he never eliminates it, but the point is we want to put yourself first, then eventually that stuff becomes less than. So I want to identify, what are some of your hobbies? What are some of the activities? What are your goals? What are some of your dreams? And let's work towards that. And then that eventually may dissipate, but each client, as you know, is different.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Karlos, man, talk to me about how you begin your treatment. What steps are you taking initially to deal with it?
For me, I think there's two aspects to it. I think, talking about obviously behavioral modification is a part of it, but I'm really interested in going deeper and again to the embedded meaning. And so for me, starting off with anyone talking about, porn addiction or just addictive patterns in general, I wrote down, motivational interviewing is something that I'm interested in doing in the beginning. And what that simply means is just understanding, again, what Dr. Curtis mentioned about your desire to actually change, explaining the change process, what the steps of change look like, seeing where they find themselves and identify themselves in the change process. Obviously, if you come to therapy, you are definitely in some level of contemplation about change, but then kind of revisiting this idea of the motivation throughout the process of working with them. The other thing is, if we're talking about like really being solution focused, I love to provide a lot of psycho ed at the beginning, resourcing. So I send clients, there are a few sites that I have shared with clients before that can give them more education, talk to them more about just the research that's out there concerning the addictive patterns. There are different kinds of software and things you can use to kind of help hold you accountable when it comes to porn use on your phones or on your social devices. And outside of that, just talking about the addiction cycle, I like to break down the addiction cycle, talking about the different parts of it, from the default positions that we fall into, the binging behavior, to the negative consequences and the resolutions that we try to make to get out of that cycle. And then also with that, helping them identify, where do you find yourself emotionally when you're wanting to go into using porn more. And so that helps to talk about, triggers, as Dr. Curtis mentioned, which is a part of relapse prevention plan. You talk about your triggers, you talk about the things that lead to your desire to use, and then talk about what are my behaviors when I use. And then from there, what are some alternative methods for coping with stress, or coping with depression, or coping with anxiety, or feelings of isolation. All of that is in there. So it's a lot to it, and it's kind of hard to try to drill it down, but it's a process. I think there's the narrative for me, really kind of understanding the embedded meaning, and then all of the other aspects of, again, behavioral modification, trying to help with getting the pattern under control.
Yeah. Intense. Me personally, my style is always confrontational empathy. So like you said, Carlos, I'm always attaching some accountability to it first. That's always my first go-to. Like, you came in here, why did you come in here? So you're making choices and decisions that go against the person that you say you want to be. All right, let's first start with that. You know what I mean? And then we start digging into that. And then once they have some accountability in it, then I can use that going through the treatment. I can always go back to, hey, this is what you said, and this is the result we're getting. And then, it's not just me beating them over the head with, you did bad, but you always have to kind of remind somebody why they started on this journey. In my experience, as I've always had to do that. And then we go into why, and I kind of go into what Sekou said. And then, hey, I'm learning all this stuff from Dr. Curtis. When he was telling me about how his methods the first time, I was just taking mental notes, and I'm like, man, I need this training, brother, honestly, to get some deeper understanding. And people that see me on this show consistently, where does the therapist go to get better, man? I go to brothers, man. This is where I go. I'm just meeting Dr. Sekou, but I've asked these other two brothers plenty of times for input and advice on certain things, man. And I'm really appreciating that y'all are here tonight to provide this information to my audience. And as I'm starting to kind of narrow it down and get ready to shut things down, I want to know from each of you, starting with you, Dr. Sekou, what advice, or we don't like to give advice, but what would you recommend for someone who is feeling ashamed, hesitant to seek help for the issue, and want to, get some help dealing with this struggle, or just overall, what are your final thoughts or takeaways from tonight?
Well, number one, I want to thank you for having me on to be a part of this. And as far as, it's always going to be important, the first step is having a conversation with someone that you trust. If you deeply know it's a problem for you and it's affecting your life, you have to reach out to someone that you trust and that you care about, and someone that also cares about you, for you to get that help. And then tapping into the resources. As far as therapy is a big thing now. 10 years ago wasn't so big, but reach out to someone that you can connect with, as far as a therapist, or someone you can trust that can find you a good therapist, so that you can start working on your issues. But the important thing is to find someone you trust, find a good support system. Because if you don't have a good support system that wants to see you win, it's really easy just to retreat and just go back into the hole and continue to do what you're doing. But once you know it's a problem, you got to speak up. You definitely have to talk about it. That's the first step.
Brother, where can the people find you if they're looking for you? Is there anything that you're up to right now that you want the people to know about? Share that with us, please.
All right. My name is Dr. Sekou Fraser. My practice is Sage Therapy Group. My doctorate's in marriage and family therapy, so I do work with a lot of couples. I also work with individuals and men. In the month of February, I'm doing a relationship type of thing, where we're going to be talking about relationships and I'm doing it with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. There's going to be some stuff to come, so I don't have all of the details, but you can find me at Dr. Sekou Fraser on Instagram and also on TikTok as well.
We can have you back before you launch that thing you was talking about in February.
Yes, brother, you can. Most definitely.
My brother. Carlos, can you give us your final thoughts, takeaways, and encouragement you want to give to the people out there tonight, and tell us where we can find you and what you up to lately.
Yeah, I would just say again, thank you again for just the forum of discussion tonight around this. I think just having more open forums is really important, having spaces to have the dialogue. And, obviously this being a free space to do this is really cool as well. But there's so much more that can be added to the conversation because there's so much nuance to the conversation. So I definitely think continuing the dialogue in future times would be cool as well. And in regards to just, what Dr. Sekou, kind of picking back off of that as well, we have to establish safe spaces in order to bring things that are in, quote unquote, the dark into the light. And so having that safe space, starting with finding trusted voices, supportive voices, finding your village to be able to do that is really important. And community really helps with this. I think because this is such a taboo topic for a lot of people. And then also just knowing that other people are struggling in the same area as you. I'm really a big proponent of group therapy as well. So just like if there are groups that are happening around topics of addiction, I'm actually not leading one, but if there are any out there, I think finding a group setting as well to be able to have some accountability with other brothers, but also individual therapy. If you obviously have a lot of shame and embarrassment without talking about it openly, just finding some space where you can be safe to discuss more about what you're dealing with. And then in regards to where you can find me, I'm on Instagram at Mr.K.Lyons. As far as like other platforms, I really don't have any other major social media. I do have a Psychology Today profile, Karlos K. Lyons. You can find me on there. My name begins with the K. So Karlos K. Lyons, I'm there. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Thank you, brother. We're going to get you back sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to be back.
Okay, man. All right. I know you don't do a whole lot for free, so I appreciate you. So I appreciate you coming up, man. I appreciate you showing up. Dr. Karlos, what say you to the people, man?
Hey, man, I appreciate it. This has really been a great space. I'm excited to be here. Certainly, thank you again, Brother Joe, for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this with these powerful Black men. I mean, real strong. I mean, hey, so it's really been my pleasure across the board. For myself, certainly, I talk a lot about, I work a lot with couples and men issues, but I talk a whole lot about the idea of the communication space that we're in. And I think this communication is not just in terms of the dialogue that we have, but I think it's just understanding attitudinally what it really means. And my big five are always this, and I want to kind of leave this, really try to stay away from shame, blame, criticism, put down, and sarcasm. Those big five will eat us alive, and it'll show up in our relationships, how we relate to others, and how we relate to ourselves. So I think that's going to be extremely important to understand how to, quote unquote, learn how to refrain from that. And even when it does come up, it's okay. That what happens is that you can resend it, or you can you can reapproach it in some form or fashion. So I think that's number one that I want to kind of make sure that I kind of put out there, because I think that impacts just about every aspect of our life. The other thing that I would just kind of reinforce is the fact that I try to simplify a lot of things that we learn and we pick up in terms of therapy. I really try to, aim for the common man in terms of that my approach. So I even talk about, when I talk about the idea of anxiety, what it is and so forth, and that's where it's regardless of where it's coming from, but it's really the fear of the unknown. And because of the fear of the unknown, we have a tendency to think that fear of the unknown, and then we develop a narrative based upon that fear. And normally that narrative that we make is grounded in the negative. And so that's a lot of our thought processes in terms of how we go about doing things. And that's regardless of your issue that you're dealing with. Okay. So I want to kind of leave that with you first. about this whole time. Certainly for me, again, I'm in private practice. While I'm in private practice, my name is, of course, I go by Dr. Curtis O. Hill. You can find me on Psychology of the Day as well. Also, I'm on LinkedIn, and I was telling Brother Joe earlier, say, you ain't gonna find me no on TikTok or no Facebook. So, 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 but if you need to reach me, though, I go. This is my handle in terms of my email is therapist@relationshipsrefocus.org. That's the name of my private practice, Relationships Refocused, PLLC. And so, of course, you can Google any of that, and believe it or not, I will show up. Of course, my other number, my business number, I have no problem putting it out there. It's 972 689 7695. 972 689 7695. So I moved from a landline. You can actually text me now. So I'm coming up in my technology. I just want to let y'all know that. So anyway, so again, I appreciate you, brothers, man. Y'all have been such a blessing to me and so forth. And hey, I look forward to getting an opportunity to kind of sit down and talk with you again.
Yeah, no, listen. Go ahead, Carlos.
I forgot to add the practice that I work at.
I was like, man, you quit. What's going on?
No. So I am one of the practitioners at Davis Counseling Center under Dr. Damian Davis, and it is practice in Dallas, North Dallas. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So you can go to our website as well and find me, any information about any of our clinicians, as well as on there to request an appointment as well. Davis Counseling Center.
Yes. Dr. Davis.
One last thing.
Give me some of his time. You too, brother. God,
I'm licensed in DC and also Texas. Psychology Today, same old stuff. I'm just catching on. I'm remembering all these things too from y'all brothers admin things. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
So I see what happens when you get brothers outside. They don't know. Hey, this is we outside now, gentlemen. That's okay. I was like that too when I first got on the platform. Hell, earlier today, I forgot to mention in my own show. Producer had to help me out in that. So, man, we're not entertainers, man. We actually really do the work. I'm happy if you find us entertainment, but we're actually in the therapy rooms doing the work. And like I said, they say there's not many of us, but less is more. It's plenty of us. We out here, and I'm joking with Carlos, man, but none of us do stuff for free. But you got this information for free tonight. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to make this a more normal thing. As I'm getting to know more and more Black male therapists around the city, we putting together a regular thing, and Dr. Curtis is helping with that. Mm-hmm. And we're going to bring these type of platforms to you on a consistent basis, so you can have somewhere to go and ask questions, and just kind of get yourself going for, what's coming up in your life. And we're really hoping that y'all go into the new year, more and more brothers are finding themselves in therapy and getting that healing and recognize and unlearning the things that you've learned in the past that are causing issues in your life, in your current day life. We out here, you can find me always at RealU, the letter U consulting.com, Psychology Today, all the things, J Corley 80 on all the platforms. But I'm here every Tuesday night. I'm right here. You can find me right here, and bringing you this information and tearing down the stigmas in whatever way I can, blasting the stereotypes in whatever way I can. It's more brothers out here seeking healing than you understand, and it's more brothers on the front line working on that healing than you might know. But there isn't a lot of us. We're kind of a rarity, and as you say, I'm sharing my platform with these brothers because you need them all. You need us all, and we all are here to do it. So see y'all next week. Again, I appreciate y'all joining me, and have a great New Year's Eve. And wherever you're in the world, maybe it's New Year's already. But like I said, let's go into the next year and make it better than the last year. Y'all have a good night.